This is Champ Miss Pac-Em for MS-DOS. 1996 conversion of the classic Namco arcade game Miss Pac-Man comes courtesy of Champ Programming or Champ Games, a former game developer known by some for their catalog of arcade conversions of games such as Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Galaga, and others. I got this off a Champ Programming fan page that has their entire games catalog available for download at no cost. Maybe somewhere along the way we'll look at some of their other games, but for now, let's take a quick look at Champ Miss Pac-Em because that's the only one I have working at the moment. On the surface, Miss Pac-Em is a seemingly impressive conversion of the arcade classic Miss Pac-Man. If not for the sidebar and the slight difference in resolution, this could easily pass for a near-perfect emulation of the game. Every bit of pixel art, every sound effect, every jingle has been painstakingly recreated. The intermissions are faithfully recreated, and the MIDI interpretations of the familiar jingles aren't too shabby either. The mazes are almost perfectly adapted, with only the most minute of differences, presumably to accommodate resolution differences. There's a bit of noise that can be heard in the background during the sampled sound bits, but considering this is a DOS game from 1996, or rather a slightly updated version released a year later, and one that was initially distributed in the shareware format, I'll let it slide, and really, that's but a minor nibble in an otherwise fine package. Miss Pac-Em is a fine conversion of Miss Pac-Man, and strictly in that regard, probably would have been the best PC version of the game available before Microsoft's Revenge of Arcade compilation for Windows would have come out in 1998, and long before the MAME emulator became a viable thing. However, what makes this iteration of the game really worth its weight is not how well it brings Miss Pac-Man over to MS-DOS, but rather what cool shit it comes with. And this comes close to rivaling Tengen's own port of Miss Pac-Man on various home video game consoles in terms of extra content. In addition to the standard arcade maps and subsequent arcade mode, Miss Pac-Em includes a Champ mode where you can play a few new mazes, some of which may be familiar to those who've played Pac-Man Collection on Atari 7800. The Champ mode plays pretty much like standard Miss Pac-Man, but in later levels, a pellet generator will bounce around and actually restore dots that have already been consumed, thereby extending your tenure in the current maze a little longer. Unlike in classic mode, each level is its own maze. No need to play a maze twice or thrice before moving on to the next. Here you clear a maze and you move on to the next maze. The game offers a dozen mazes to play with, and should you clear all the mazes and feel a need for more challenging fare, why not make them yourself? That's right, kids. Create your own mazes, making them as easy or as difficult as you want it to be. Once you're done, save your creation and set it in the maze menu to play. Go crazy, but not too crazy. The editor's actually not too shabby and fairly straightforward, but as you really get deep into things, it does have a tendency to lag quite a bit, feeling a bit sluggish at times to a point where you have to wait a few seconds before the changes you make register on screen. I'm not quite sure if this is a flaw with the actual game software, or if this is strictly a DOS box thing, but in either case, you'll definitely need a bit of patience in building your own menacing mazes, especially when you try to save your creation and you're given errors such as the tunnel being too wide or there aren't enough dots. Like I said, go crazy, but not too crazy. If you stick with it, you could create some really cool stuff with it. Controlling Miss Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Em, is fine, whether it's with the keyboard or a calibrated joystick or a gamepad thing. Moving Miss Pac-Em around is about as fluid and responsive as any competently made Miss Pac-Man conversion. Not much in terms of additional controls, you just use the arrows and whatever to move her around, though the game does allow you to customize your controls for some reason. There is a turbo button included, but all it does is speed up the game speed for the time you have it held down. It's not like the pack booster of the Tengen games. I don't know why you'd want that though. There's a bunch of other technical bits you could fix around, whether it be game speed or whatever the case may be. There's also a variety of two-player variations. It's alright, I guess. Hey, it's nice to have the options at least.
Hello, Dave from the future here. The slowdown mentioned is definitely a DOSBox issue. This according to Jean Champeau, the creator of Champ Games, and I am inclined to believe him. So you just fix your DOSBox settings and it should be running fine.
There's not much else I could say about Champ Miss Pac-Em, so overall, this is a really slick conversion of a classic Miss Pac-Man that plays about as well as you'd expect from an MS-DOS conversion of Miss Pac-Man. There's been a number of Pac-Man conversions for DOS, but this is probably one of the better ones I've come across. Not just in terms of how it plays, and don't get me wrong, it plays really well, but Also in terms of content, the modes of play and the options offered to customize your experience, and of course that level editor, even with all its warts, makes the package all the more sweeter. All in all, a solid dose of pack for vintage DOS.